Hello and welcome to the Business Class Lounge, the podcast where I interview marketing leaders and executives to understand how they really think about leadership, management, finance, and more. This is a podcast from Searchpilot. My name is Will Critchlow. Today, I'm looking forward to talking to Cian Weeresinghe. I've actually known Cian since college, but it took us a little while to realise we'd both ended up in internet marketing. Since getting into digital at eBay, as one of a cohort of incredibly talented folks in the UK digital industry who are now scattered doing interesting things all around the UK startup scene, he's run growth at The Guardian following their massive domain migration in 2013, been CMO at cool travel company Secret Escapes, and is now CMO at Wise, previously TransferWise. Guess he just can't avoid being suckered in by big domain moves. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Cian. Cian, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think you've had a fascinating career up to this point, and I want to hear more about all the twists and turns that journey has taken. So I thought maybe a great place to start would be about the career side of things. Mm-hmm. What do you feel like you can attribute your career success and the career direction to? What are the big decisions you made, and what do you look back on with joy?
Wow, with joy. Gosh, and it's been quite a long path, and I often say it's been like quite a wiggly path to get to experience some of the things I feel like I've been able to contribute to. A lot of it, I think, when I look back, is the people I got to meet over time and maintaining those relationships over the long term. I started my career at Capital One, and I was 22 years later, I was joyfully discovering that Matt, who worked at Capital One in the same cohort, was our CFO at Wise, and we had a lot of commonality. I'm also quite proud that I've had 10 jobs, I think. The majority of them was got because I knew the person.
Yep.
And that was just compounding networks over time, and then challenging myself to work at places where everyone was better than me. And hopefully that would also help build those networks over time. And the other thing was I made a few, somewhere between accident and being deeply thoughtful, identified things that I wanted to get more experience of, which were adjacent to what I had learned.
Yeah.
That I predicted I probably need to be better than rubbish at, and try to get that experience over my career, whether it was through consulting, through doing slightly adjacent jobs, or through just like spending time within a role in domains I wasn't hugely comfortable with.
Yeah, you mentioned the connections to people there, and that's probably one of the things that over the years I've seen you do most, is build up, cultivate, and connect people. And you've had a couple of key moments, like for me looking from the outside in, eBay is one of those just hotbeds of UK talent.
Yeah.
It feels like, that cohort that you were there with, they're everywhere now. And you've got all kinds of incredible senior positions, aren't they? So when you look at those people you've worked with over the years, and you look at, the very best of them, what have you looked up to, or what do you feel like you've learned?
Yeah, because it was quite that eBay moment was quite a turning point for me in my career. And if Claire Johnson from the Up Group is listening, she really was like fundamental to that. Mm-hmm. It was at eBay where I met Ellen as well. So who's my wife.
Big personal impact as well.
Yeah, totally. I was really uncertain what I was going to do with my life just before that job. I had bumbled along doing data warehousing, a bit of analysis, all the way through in financial services, because that was probably like a sensible career choice.
Yeah.
I was not really enjoying it, but I loved the internet. I just loved the internet. And I loved eBay, right? Buying and selling random bits and bobs. And
buying crazy things.
Yeah. And Claire called me and was like, there's a job going at eBay. I was like, wow, what? This exists. And I remember I went for the interview, and so we both went to the same college. My college mum was interviewing me. So a lady called Minal Shah. And she was like, you? I'm like, oh God. I have some priors that live in your memory forever. And I was, I think, stunned. Capital One and eBay were very deliberate about hiring incredibly high caliber people. And I excused myself from that group because I was kind of off to both those jobs wondering what I was doing there. And almost like people didn't realize they were hiring that caliber of employee. And I think they were able to bring people who had great, interesting experience. And often, sometimes it was like a lot of ex-consultants and MBAs, and then make them do tactical work. So not just think, but also do. Some of the learnings, like there's a chap called Pete Wade, who's CEO at Trainline now, I think. Amazing guy. Mm-hmm. I love him dearly. He was the one who taught me about the sniff test. Like he was like, you can look at data all day long, you can do analysis till you go blue in the face. but you're going to have to learn over a period of time how to detect if something doesn't smell good, right? And that's quite a hard muscle.
My team hates me for this. I remember our old CFO and COO in distilled days would hate the way that they'd be working on a spreadsheet for hours and multiple people would look at it, and then I'd be like, but wait, like that number there doesn't kind of look right. And they'd be like, what do you mean it doesn't look right? It's a spreadsheet. And it's like, no, but there's got to be a mistake because that number isn't right. So I know exactly what you mean there. And I agree. Yeah, super powerful skill, actually. Very interesting tactical one. Have you ever thought about teaching that deliberately to people?
I do it like not explicitly. I do it through how I challenge people's assumptions.
Right.
And I do try to explain.
And your team comes to you with something.
Yeah, and I'll be like, but what do we need to believe in for this to be true? And just check yourself when you work through your assumptions of like these ranges, like, because sometimes you'll get to an assumption where you're like, this is going to be really hard, like for this assumption to hold, like if you just step back and smell it.
Yeah.
But some of it is just a little bit of maths and some of it is experience. And sometimes I'm never sure quite what the balance is between the two, of having like seen it like 15 versions of a plan go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there's no advanced maths, right? You're not doing any calculus or anything.
No. You're just some timesing and multiplying.
Exactly. So like, it is basic spreadsheet stuff. But the other one I think that's somewhat interesting I found is trying to get a sense of scale or like bigness of lots of things. You know, like how big's the UK economy? How big is the budget of a major corporation? How, like, just orders of magnitude, like, not down to
magnitude.
And I feel like I hate it when I'm reading news stories now, and they're talking about how many billion or something. And you're like, really though? And like, don't buy it.
And I think you can see right through an interview process why those much hated estimation case study questions were used to force people to have like a natural muscle around computing scale quickly.
Yeah.
A boss many jobs later used to do that live mentally in the mental arithmetic in meetings and would quiz me on my version of that number. And I'd be sat there like dumbfounded, like, I don't know how you did that maths. And I walked away going, I need to learn. So I went on YouTube and found all the tricks to do multiple times tables. And I used to just practice it on the way to work at the age of 85. I just learned how do I do percentages quickly? How do I times two-digit numbers together quickly?
You're well set up for the ages of your kids now then. That's perfect. Whatever, key stage 2 learnings.
I've taught them how to do the 9 times table quickly. Because in an interview, someone asked me to do 99 times 99. And I was like, I don't know. And then there's a trick to it. So
sure. Yeah.
So I think that, and I think like you said, that smell capability is this sort of commercial add-on you sort of bolt onto your capability versus your specialism, which, like you say, you can be so narrow you can't quantify scale off where you're narrowly focusing.
Yeah, lose sight of the context. No, that's really interesting. I actually heard you tell the story about being interviewed by your college mum. I think it was on Timo's.
Oh yes, cool. Sorry, I'm repeating myself.
No, it's good, but it was funny because the context is obviously we went to the same university, same college, and that is such a weird and unpredictable part of our histories. I don't think either of us knew what we were getting into, really, by the sounds of things.
I don't really remember. This was like 2009. I was leaving eBay, and Twitter suddenly became a thing. And I think someone retweeted you, and I was like, W. Critchlow? Is that the same guy who played basketball at university? Is he doing this internet stuff? I think I pinged you. I was like, are you the same guy? Are we in the same industry somehow? Like,
that's right. It must have been around then, because I hadn't kept track of what you're up to, obviously. And same thing. Yeah.
And the same with Middle. I was like, you work at an internet company? Like, isn't this like pets.com 2000? Like, why are you doing this in 2006? I was very baffled that. I thought it was just for the weirdos and the nerds. But it was great journeys.
I think the way you phrased it on Timo's podcast was you had to convince her that you weren't a complete degenerate, was the words you used. But there's a serious point in here, though, of how do you think about professionalism as you get kind of, more senior in your career? And we've both been in plenty of kind of private situations where everybody's much more laid back. Work situations, but, you're not tweeting stuff on the internet, and everybody's much more laid back. But there's obviously still lines. And like, how do you figure out what's appropriate, what's not, how to be interesting and human and maybe even funny, right? But also professional and the right amount grown up.
eBay, we did this thing called situational leadership, like how you adopt to your style based on context. And I think that was very much about the context of delegation and managing someone, depending on their capability and their motivation. But I think that style alteration, deliberateness, is quite important, of being able to understand the situation and land the right level of brevity to seriousness, as well as being able to judge reactions where you feel like you can start on one track and realize it's not really the right place and time.
Gently back away. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there is a credibility thing you have to manage with the ability to be quite approachable.
Mm-hmm.
It's a balancing act, and I think you have to be getting feedback from your team of whether you're striking that right balance.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like some of the people I enjoy the company of most and have got a lot out of, again, in the business context, they're not always the most buttoned up, serious people, right? Obviously. And I think that's natural. But we also all know people who cross that line, who go too far. And I think one of the things I kind of worry about, I mean, for all of us, but especially for the generation growing up now, is that you talk about kind of situational awareness, but you get a kind of situational collapse where, you know, somebody might be recording a talk you give that's supposed to be off the record, or the way social media plays into all of those kind of things, or even, you know, the trend of a lot of people like delete their old tweets or whatever, because, you know, I forget the quote, but, you know, give me 7 lines of written by whoever, and you know, I'm totally mangling it. But basically, look at enough stuff that somebody's written, and they will have said something suitably offensive. And I don't know. I don't really have a question there, but that's something I worry about.
Yeah, and I think it's. I think everyone has to there's this is work family and I think some people, especially for that period where we hired so many people remote, where you don't have a chance to build culture with proximity, it's quite hard to course correct norms being formed that are just not cool, because that definitely can happen, just not cool. I think there's a great benefit for everyone to have this camaraderie, which often is with levity and humour, but also have the seriousness of when work needs to get done or when shit hits the fan. And I think you have to role model that seriousness when things are deeply important, and then make sure you also, in terms of norms, try to reset stuff you think where people haven't really understood those boundaries.
Yeah, one of the more challenging bits of leadership is the fact that it falls to you to be the one who says, guys, not cool.
Not cool, yeah.
That's not appropriate. And sometimes do that in public, right? In the moment, not just when you've had a chance to think about it and construct your thoughts and speak to HR and whatever else. You know, you've got to do it right there and then.
It's quite hard to, you don't want to, you should expect some challenge to why you're saying it's not cool, but sometimes you don't want to have a debate about ethics or morality or free speech at the time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes things are just it's just not cool. Definitely as part of how you want to think about values and culture, and as well as feedback loops as well, because it's quite hard to give that feedback of it wasn't cool what you said or what you did.
It's hard to receive as well, hard to hear that feedback, I think. So awkward potentially all around. Tricky question about it, but do you remember a time that you can talk about when, as you say, the shit was hitting the fan and you had to suddenly flip from, you know, I'm Cian, you're not friend exactly, you know, I'm probably still your boss, but you know, we get on and we have fun, and now we need to buckle up and this is for real. Yeah,
I mean, probably won't have specifics here, but generally where we've had crisis, we've had in my career many crisis situations, from whether there's points during COVID at Secret Escapes to recent moments here, where I think, you know, you trust your team, and at Wise we trust our team deeply into this autonomous team structure. But there are moments where the moment requires you to take the handle of the tiller, going to get my ship metaphors incorrect, and be incredibly clear and directive and make decisions yourself and navigate your way through. And people will look to you to do that, and you can't waver in those moments. And I think I've had to learn how to get better at that every time it's happened, because some points there's not enough time to, and these are not long-term fundamental challenges that, you know, play out for 6 months. These are things that happen over 2 days where you just need to navigate it. And I think as long as you're very explicit, out loud, transparent and confident, and you might not be confident internally, but you're going to have to pick a play. You got to portray it that we're doing this, this is the next thing we do, you guys should be thinking about this, we've solved this bit of information, and then that's the next thing we'll do. That some of that is I was never good at it, and it's just through practice, and some people are naturally.
Yeah, I think it's a learned skill for most people, to be honest. But I think part of it for me was also realizing it is difficult. You've got to pick one of them. You might be wrong, but also the team wants it in those moments. they're looking for somebody to say, we're doing this, more than they're looking for the perfect answer most of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Also that you don't ignore people's feedback, but you can make that next decision. And I think the thing is just avoiding those sort of one-way doors as you go through that decision tree.
Or at least realising when you're at one.
Yeah, and just like, okay, fine, I know it's one way. We're going to make a real commitment going down this route. And sometimes you have to work out how much you trust your smell and how much you need advice. And in those moments of crisis, not to be too arrogant to think you know best.
Yeah, it's a very difficult line to tread, I think, isn't it? You mentioned in-person and building kind of culture and values. Are you back in the office every day? What has the team?
So we've got pretty cool offices here with lots of dogs in it. So I do get to see the full range of dogs' sizes. We are back. Some are tiny, some are like horses. We're back between 1 to 2 days a week. I'm in 2 days a week. I still work 4 days. But basically, we've told the teams, and this is a really hard one to thread, like I try to give them enough context to help them design their own hybrid working plan by team, just given there is nuance. I think it's very easy to forget like social capital, which like was built over time historically. And especially for new people, where sometimes, we've been a little bit more explicit saying like when someone joins and on board, you need to be there more often. Yeah. But it's absolutely heaving today and it's joyous. Like the boss is it's good vibes at the moment.
Yeah. We're doing a similar kind of blend. And one of the weird things I miss is Fridays in the office, because nobody ever picks Friday as being the kind of, oh, let's go in on Friday.
Yeah.
But Thursday's no substitute for Friday.
No.
In the actual, that kind of chill, you're actually getting some deep work done, but it's Friday afternoon, and
exactly,
it's just
it's real
starting. You can feel the weekend coming, and I miss sharing that kind of feeling. But I think that's a lost cause. I don't think I'm getting anybody back into the office on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, we do lunch. We do a little bit of like literal carrots of
literal carrots.
Lunch. Literal carrots of breakfast on Mondays and lunches on Fridays, and I think it's helped a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think it's a compounding thing. Like for a long period, people were coming in like, what's the point of me being here? This like one person. It's a ghost town.
Absolutely. It's a kind of reverse prisoner's dilemma or something. It's kind of everybody wants everybody to be in more, but nobody wants to go in more.
But in case no one, some game theorist is there like puzzling.
Cackling. Yeah, exactly.
Like at a game theorist consultancy office, how many people are in the office? No one. It's always empty.
Yeah.
It's a Nash equilibrium. But they'll never close the office, just in case.
Yeah, just in case. I mean, there will be those consultancies out there. I can't remember what's the name of. There's some consultancy I worked with alongside back in the day, because my last proper job before working for myself was like telecoms consulting.
Right.
Strategy consulting in the telecoms industry. Yep. And we did a lot of work for Ofcom. We did some work on the auctions that Ofcom used to
course.
run.
Oh, wow.
That was sort of my academic background was in that side of things. And I've forgotten the name of the firm now, but there was basically a firm that was specialist in exactly that, like basically auction theory, advising the bidders, advising the people designing the auction as well. Anyway, I could geek out about that for hours.
Can I ask you how you ended up from consulting telecoms businesses to your journey?
Absolutely. So there's a little diversion in there. So basically, before we met, before I went to university, I was dabbling on the internet, right? In some of the same ways that you described. I remember when we first got the internet at school in maybe 94, and it was like one chemistry teacher had dial-up in his classroom, and he was like, look at this amazing thing. And then, the first time having it at home and all of those kind of eras. And so Duncan Morris, my co-founder at Distilled now in Search Pilot, he and I went to the same school.
Oh, of course, yeah.
We were friends at school, we played basketball together, and we basically both geeked out about this kind of emerging internet thing. And it solved just some really tactical problems. Like for some of our friends' 18th birthdays, we wrote them little books that were like little silly picture book type things. But we didn't have internet at home, so we used to have to bring a floppy disk into school every day and swap our drafts back and forth with each other.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
The moment when we could email them to each other was like, oh my God, our workflow has improved how many times. And so we started building websites in the late 90s before going to university, and actually had a small company doing that. It was kind of a little freelancey type thing, all kinds of adventures for another day. But we thought about going and doing that without going to university, just like, let's start a business together.
Okay.
Business was really the driver. We wanted to run a business together.
Right.
And internet was the thing we were passionate about. This was the early .com kind of bubble starting to get frothy. So every day you'd read the newspaper and it would be, such and such .com has raised however much to revolutionize the industry for whatever. Obviously, those businesses are now successful. Versions of them are now successful, but not all of them. It wasn't the time in the late 90s necessarily. But anyway, sane our heads prevailed. We both went off to university, different universities, but we moved to London at the same time after university. So he did a 4-year degree in Scotland, which has the entry-level year, and I did a 1-year part 3, master's stuff.
Of course, yeah.
We ended up leaving university at the same time, moved to London together, couldn't afford to start that business we'd always talked about, and moved to London. So we went and got proper jobs for a bit. And he worked in insurance and data warehousing. I initially worked in more like financial consulting. They called themselves strategy consultants, but it was really more IT and finance. And so I wanted to get more into real strategy stuff. Did that at what at times called analysis for 18 months or so. And then, we were like, well, we're 25. We don't have a mortgage or kids yet. If we're going to do this business thing, we should do it now because it's only going to get harder. And because we were bootstrapping from nothing. So.
And that was distilled.
That became distilled, It's about a year in, we were like, let's make a company and actually do it properly. So we started out building small business websites, basically. Yeah. And then all those clients were asking us, how do we get visible?
SEO.
Yeah, the rest is history, basically.
Oh, very cool.
Which is perhaps a segue into the SEO side of things. So obviously, SEO isn't everything of your role, but SEO is an important channel in what you do now and in places you've been before that. So I'm particularly interested in like senior marketing management and oversight of SEO. So how do you think about holding your SEO team to account? What do you ask them to, report to you on? How do you think about targets? How do you think about that whole world?
I was very blessed. You probably know Fabrizio to have like his leadership and capability in the organization when I joined. I obviously have an appreciation of the domain. I sort of dabbled personally as well as helped on the domain migration at The Guardian.
Yep.
And what was impressive here, and I don't think I've tinkered with it too much, is how the team have aligned the KPIs, the short and long-term KPIs of investing in SEO. How do you think about the actual investments, whether it's people, freelancers, tech, and then how do you start correlating that with growth, whether it's at the midterm or longer term, and making sure the teams are as autonomously aligned to success themselves, so they know, I've done this, it's got better, and I'm confident that if this number gets better, we deliver our North Star.
Yeah.
Teams aren't too far removed from North Star from like their day-to-day metrics in terms of like logical jumps. And we give them broad investment parameters, which, always need a bit of tweaking. That's where I spend most of my time thinking about. But apart from that, they are not free, but broadly allowed to decide how they want to grow. Empowered to just like hire, and I think accountability and autonomy are your sort of things that have to hold each other close together. The accountability side is that everyone has to share their plans publicly every quarter and get feedback on them and share your retros publicly. And you should respond to the feedback, either like, cool, I'm ignoring you because of why, or awesome, I'm going to adjust my plan.
Yeah.
And I think there's a very strong philosophy around that side of the accountability equation for autonomy.
Yeah.
So it's a hard one because SEO, like when we think about budgeting, you compare it like paid media on a spreadsheet, spend fully loaded versus impact. But it's not. It's in itself like a cohort model where people build content and that content generates value over time.
Yeah.
So the money I invest in SEO today is not related really to the amount of users I get from SEO today.
Totally.
And whereas paid is fairly closely aligned, right? My paid investment on a DR basis. And whereas things like product and engineering probably smell a bit more like SEO, and things like potential brand investment is a bit like that, where you have this lag. And you want to work out how, and the joy of SEO is that, because there's no media component, your economics are much more interesting. The question there is like, how do you think about elasticity of scaling SEO when you only have that vertical view of impact versus investment? So something we're thinking about right now.
Yeah, there's some similarity in the same way that, your marketing spends this quarter, even your direct ones, your media spend and so forth, even if they acquire top of funnel this quarter, that's not necessarily this quarter's revenue.
No.
So that you've got that kind of lag, but then you've also got that characteristic of SEO, or like you said, same with brand really, where you've got kind of residual value. You're building in some sense an asset. But really fascinating.
And I think like we do try to expose that asset value at a page level. So like every team understands like what they built, how much that page is generated, how the performance of that page improves or decays over time. Should we build new content or try and like optimize existing content? Like it's that level of granularity and ability to track a metric to it, wherever it is down the funnel, where it's useful. I think gives us those levers to decide where to spend the next hour or time or dollar of investment.
Yes, because I think it's also closely related to another topic that I've heard you talk about before, and I know you're kind of passionate about, of incrementality. Because you've got not only the kind of elasticity of next dollar spent, but also the, okay, we acquire a user, but how incremental is that? And I guess maybe that's a bit less pressing in SEO because, you're not paying per click in the same way.
Exactly.
So the economics are a bit more favorable. I was talking to somebody the other day at really big co, so kind of think the kind of place that has their name on the NFL or NBA stadiums in the US. And they were talking about how within the SEO team, so this was a senior SEO leader saying that they're only allowed to kind of take credit for, I think it was like 40% of even what they think is incremental. So they have their kind of models that spit out incremental benefit. And then somebody kind of comes along with a red pen and says, yeah, but 60% of that you only managed to do because you're at, it wasn't Salesforce, but you only managed to do that because you're at Salesforce and it's on the salesforce.com domain. And we,
right.
And so everything is easier and gets more results than it would do at a kind of smaller organization. But they just had this really blunt instrument, like just literally across the board saying, yeah, okay, fine, great. You're delivering this much revenue according to all of the models that we have. You get credit for X% of it, which seemed a bit of a blunt tool to me, but was interesting.
I was at this Facebook event where Javier, the COO, who used to be VP of Growth, was speaking. He's a super impressive. He's Alex Schultz's boss, I think. And those two are like the smartest people. Well, I know Alex very well. He's the smartest guy I know. And Javier seems to be, again, a very impressive figure.
I mean, if Alex respects him, then you could believe that.
Humble dude. And he made this really good point of like, you need teams to be able to understand what is in their control versus out of their control. Like what is exogenous, or like how much of their growth is just happening to them versus how much of their growth is they're able to influence. Then there's a secondary debate of how much credit they should get for it and whether that would bias your investment decision. And maybe on SEO it doesn't. Like if you like in that case you said you gave them 100% versus only 40%, you'd still make the same decision of where to put the next dollar. But the paid side is the biggest like pile of spaghetti where you're really in this like hall of mayhem around thinking about incrementality across all the different ad platforms, challenges of the measurement. That one gives me more heartburn than the organic side.
Well, and also the swings in the numbers are so big, aren't they? The fact that you can deploy that budget in an instant or waste that budget in an instant.
Oh my God,
like horrifying.
Those are all one-way doors. You're like, oops, I just spent that amount of money on the ad campaign.
I'm going to have to explain that in the next maybe not even quarterly retrospective. But
really?
So you mentioned you spent a lot of time thinking about that kind of budget mix.
Yeah.
Where have you kind of got to on thinking about that? Do you kind of start with a big pie and say, right, I've got X million to spend, I'm going to divvy it up across channels like this? Or do you kind of go more bottom up? How do you think about it?
So like very much bottom up. The thing you probably need to be clear on, and I need to get better at, is setting like the parameters or like rough context for how marketing want to grow versus how the business is growing. Because if marketing say we want to quadruple spend, but the business is only expected to grow less than quadruple, you kind of have a little bit of like a thought experiment to go through about why. So not just like the context of the shape of the curves of the different parts of the org, but also like the economic parameters around their dollars. Like you should be optimizing to this level of ROI, and this is why, or this payback number. But then we go bottom up, and that's because the teams know are much closer to how their channels scale and the elasticities. And then, like, there's a beautiful theoretical piece of work, which we did at eBay, which was Minnow-led, which really was like, average ROI is X, but there's a bunch of stuff on the margin, which is ugly as hell. That's all negative, right?
Right.
And we probably should cut our marketing budget because, like, there's no real, the incremental growth of this extra spend is not very interesting. And it was a really powerful thing to work with someone who told finance we should cut marketing budget.
Yeah.
And finance were like, okay, that's pretty sensible. I don't think we've got to that level of sophistication where I'm sort of trying to make these like last dollar incremental trade-offs between channels, but that's the sort of thing we want to get to where, channels feel they have an understanding of where their next £10,000 or £100,000, how effective it is.
Yeah.
And us be able to somehow translate that as like, is there anywhere else we could put it? Because for us, if we can't put it anywhere that's effective, we want to give it back to the customers and reduce the price of the product. So that's quite a good forcing function.
Yeah. And obviously very mission aligned for you. There's quite a lot of this that it sounds like this is basically your job, right? It's effectively and efficiently allocating across all these things. But from time to time, you must get your team coming to you saying, we should do this thing. And how do you think about when they come to you with a really big number, right? We should spend, I don't know, what is a big number? 6 figures, 7 figures on something, whatever this initiative might be. You've got the sniff test stuff that we talked about earlier, but are you looking for some kind of credibility around it, but are you looking for some kind of, I don't know, like ROI hurdle, or how would they come to you effectively to get something like that?
So, like you say, it depends on, it's like magnitude and confidence is through their ability to tell you, and like what framework are they going to put in place to tell you at the end whether it met the objectives. Like, these are the objectives, this is how we're going to measure it, and then this is how I'll come back and tell you. And they have to overlay some sort of confidence of like, I'm pretty sure we'll be in some sort of range. And if I'm not sure, we should do a test that's smaller. Huge Hail Marys of like, we need 10 million quid to go and sponsor McLaren.
Yeah,
I struggle with, and to be fair, like I suggested that one, and I have to like internally check myself. I'm like, I don't know how to think about these things, right? Especially when they're
kind of one-offs, right? You can't test that kind of thing.
No, and my confidence is not through I don't believe it could work. Is that I don't know how to think about these things. So hopefully, I did the exercise I'd expect my team to do, which was like to talk to lots of people, start writing some stuff down, and then where I had nervousness, challenge myself. And then almost like force fit it to some sort of set of numbers. Like, right, the reason we would try to do this stuff would be to move awareness at this place. And then you want to move awareness consideration. And like, you could build a funnel. And at some point I was like, I don't think sticking our logo on a car moving really fast is probably the best use of our money right now.
Disappointingly.
Because I can raise awareness, but no one will know what we do for consideration because you've just got a logo. So, if you're someone else, Google, everyone knows what Google does. And the teams, I think, have been able to operate in that confidence versus conviction spectrum quite well at certain budget levels. And a lot of the time they do that pretty autonomously. Like, nothing comes to me, really. They make the call.
You get told about it.
Yeah, they're like, this doesn't work. Recently, we've made adventures in television where the capital cost is higher. And that has been a little bit around like being clear about the guidance on test budget. Like, what are the parameters? And some people like test budget has to be within this ROI threshold. And that's actually, well, if it's less than the amount, it can be within any, if it fails completely, it's fine.
Right.
And people just need to know that.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't tell me it failed because you have no idea how to assess whether it worked.
Yeah, that's the wrong kind of failure.
That's the wrong failure of like, how did it go? Don't know. And I'm like, unacceptable.
Yeah.
If it was like, we measured all this stuff, this, within our confidence bounds, it was minus 50% ROI. I'm like, cool, that's fine.
Yeah, understood. Got it.
What do we learn? Let's not do that again, please.
Yeah, yeah. Because you did a lot of TV at Secret Escapes, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was Tom's sort of genesis of how Secret Escapes approached television. At the time, people were saying it wouldn't work, so Tom challenged that.
For like direct response.
Yeah. They were like, it won't work for a digital brand. No one does TV. Tom was like, really? I'm sure we can get this to work. But then also not thinking we were so arrogant, we knew how to do it. So went externally for consultative advice, which is what I do pretty regularly. I don't feel like you should think you know everything and you should bring in experts where needed. Yeah. So TV was a huge success story for Secret Escapes.
Yeah.
Kind of a fun channel. It's a terrifying channel because of capital costs.
Mm-hmm.
You can quickly re-edit a TV ad to make 5 different versions if you don't quite like what you got versus a banner.
Yeah. But you can't just dip a toe.
Yeah, you have to make an ad, and ads aren't cheap. So
yes, yeah. You mentioned kind of outside expertise there, so kind of agencies or whatever, but also more generally, where do you learn? Who do you pay attention to? Are there podcasts you listen to, or like books you'd recommend, or I don't know, email newsletters? Like, what's your thing?
Podcasts, I quite like the news guys, the news agents, but that's just not related to the industry. I quite like my current affairs. It's basically, I think, like I've honed my Twitter to be my like hot pot of what I need to know.
Yeah. Dan
Barker, like if you don't follow Dan, love that guy.
Surely everybody already follows Dan.
Yeah, I assume so. I'll give a shout out to Fabrizio, who's at Peshnet. I've got more interested in like commentators on like the more macro trends of growth businesses. So there's a guy called Wasteland Capital who's great and mostly borrowed ideas. And there's a really interesting chap who's an engineer. Like I like finding people who are like in adjacent disciplines who are experts and who are quite noisy. There's a guy called Gurgley, I'm going to say it wrong, or slash. He was ex-Uber and he's a really interesting chap talking about like engineering hiring and like what's going on in the engineering market as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, I don't know, I feel like I've tweaked my Twitter over 15 years to get to this point where it tells me what I need to know, I hope.
The right blend of trolls and...
Yes, exactly. I do follow everyone Donald Trump follows as well. I think it's very important. And I follow GB News because sometimes you don't notice, like you discover how the filter bubbles can slowly permeate your brain and you don't really notice that you're reading avidly something from someone horrendously right-wing.
You have to kind of check the source.
Exactly. Oh my God, it's this person.
Yeah. I come from kind of the SEO skew, but I'm kind of interested in who the SEO teams report to. So it's that kind of level of like who's doing really interesting, innovative work at that like leadership level.
Like Tim at OVO, I've often gone to him. He was ex-Thread and Spotify. I love the gang at Trainline. That's Jo McClintock, who's ex-Skyscanner.
Oh, yeah.
She's now at Trainline. You know, if you want to think about that blend where you go into like on the brand marketing side.
Definitely.
For me, like the way I challenge myself is like I talk to people who are, you know, the CMO thing, there's no one flavor and everyone is slightly biased one way. And I generally just go for counsel with people who are biased in different areas than I am for advice quite regularly. I think, again, you can't assume you know everything.
Definitely. Yeah, it's really fascinating when you see people who come up through all the different I think CMOs must be one of the more diverse background.
Absolutely.
People could be direct response or brand or all kinds of different things, or even kind of more from the modeling side.
Yeah. And I don't think there's a great, like, especially like measurement is always my like pet area. I love to debate with people, and there's such a good group of people who are thinking hard but quite disparately about the problem. So I spent some time last week with Nadia, who's running analytics at CarWow, ex-Google, great perspective in the world. Spent some time with a chap called Sam Barrows. He's a really fascinating dude. He's ex-Booking Uber, data science. He's leading the brand data science team at Airbnb, because you're probably aware they declared zero investment in performance, all their investment in brand, and they've got a very highly functioning and very smart team trying to like work out how to measure that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I go cap in hand going, what have you learned? Please help me on like solve some of these intractable problems.
It's definitely, as I said right at the beginning, I think it's one of your superpowers. Like you, all the time, you'd be like incredibly good at connecting and bringing people together. And so it's no surprise that those people would answer the call or reply to the email when you reach out to them.
I think Alex at Meta was my sort of role model on this, who out loud said, I love to connect people. If I ask, I'll always offer something back in return, like you can call on me anytime. And I think that's been quite just a powerful mantra to keep. You discover like you just keep bumping into people who somehow over this like spider web of connections that slowly emerge in London or globally. I think everyone's just generally quite generous with their time anyway. So
definitely, they talk about it being the original superpower of Silicon Valley, didn't they? Of or going all the way back to the gang of however many it was that formed Intel back in the day.
Right, back in the day.
Fairchild. Yeah, that because of the way that they were trying to escape that kind of East Coast stereotype, they wanted to be more relaxed and to just hang out and swap ideas and all those kinds of things. And California not allowing non-competes and things like that.
Yes.
There's a whole load of those kinds of things which just over, like you said, decades, forms that cross-pollination of ideas and
people.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have operated in London, and it doesn't obviously have that exact history, but within the niches, within the technology group, certainly you feel that generosity, and the number of people who've throughout my career have just been like exceptionally prepared to just hang out and answer my stupid questions. It's phenomenal, really.
I've learned so much and made better decisions through the gift of others, people's time, helping me like shape my approach, or even just spend some time solving a problem together. Because I think like
nothing like getting concrete, is there?
No, exactly. Like actually pick a problem and like work it through together, and hopefully deliver a solution. So there's a weird, warm, fuzzy feeling when those sort of moments happen, when someone, after a long period of time, connects with you again, and you get a chance to hang out again.
Yeah, definitely. There's probably a good place to bring it to a close. Just on that brief tactical point at the end there, is there, for anybody like earlier career specifically, so maybe who hasn't built up our networks at this stage, do you have any tactical tips? Like, how do you think about getting started if you're a 20-something just breaking in?
I think you should, I know LinkedIn is like lame and basic, but you should be pretty aggressive at anyone you meet. Definitely connect with them.
Definitely agree with that.
I think you should not be afraid to just find people you think are inspiring in the industry and contact them for time, if you're very clear about how you want to spend time with them, or ask people to leverage their network for you. Again, if you are quite clear about how they would pitch that, like, I would love you to introduce me to 3 people who look like this, and I'm looking just for a 5-minute coffee.
Yeah.
Because I think, again, there's a bit of pay it forward that if you can help people at this stage through your network, at some point they might work for you or you might work for them. So
it's all interconnected.
Yeah, so I think just don't be afraid to get people who are further in their career to do a bit of legwork, whether it's coffees or doing introductions.
Good call.
Just be very precise about what you want.
What the actual ask is. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
On that note, thank you for being so generous with your time.
No, I absolutely loved it, dude.
It's been a blast catching up, and great conversation, and we'll catch up in person very soon with a bit of luck.
Looking forward to it. I'll subscribe to the podcast and I'll smash the like button and I'll send it around.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe, dude. Cool. Catch you later, man.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening today. If you have any questions about anything we discuss on the podcast, drop me a line by email at podcast@searchpilot.com or get in touch on Twitter, where I'm at Will Critchlow. This podcast is the Business Class Lounge from SearchPilot. SearchPilot helps large websites prove the value of SEO by making SEO tests easier, faster, and more accurate. You can find out more about SearchPilot at searchpilot.com. Today's podcast was produced by Mark Cotton and hosted by me, Will Critchlow. If you enjoyed the conversation, please recommend it to a friend.